only, I think, 30% used thus far, unless they really step it up over the next few months. So to ensure that that utilization happens, you've clearly given them that year and said, hey, if the money isn't used, you'll get it back. Is it possible to maybe release it based on performance? I ask this because we work with the state level in sanitation, and we know that this funding is not easily available for their own shoring up of CapEx, where it's even possible for them to draw on it. So how can you push these states to use that CapEx more? And you raise a specific point on municipal bonds, which were very important, again, in this whole exercise. I wasn't sure what that linkage was. You mentioned it was to do with helping the municipalities come up the curve so they can issue municipal bonds. But how can we help in this journey?
States using the money which goes to them in the name of 50-year capital expenditure loan that the central government is giving is not all that disheartening as you would have inferred from the economic survey. It was delayed in its launch a bit because states had to come up with proposals and then to set it rolling. Last year's 1 lakh crore, about 80% of it was unconditional, so the states could use it the way they want, provided of course it's used within that year and for capital expenditure. The rest 20% had all the conditions attached, power reforms and so on, one nation, one ration card and so on. This year that has been increased because of two reasons. One, we felt that there was a good appetite for more funds and continuation of the scheme. That's not possible if they didn't absorb it last year. One. Second, we've also increased the outlay. Last year was 1 and this year is 1,30,000. And this year too, it'll have a good share which will be left to the discretion of the states to use the way they want it. And also a portion of it subject to conditions, one of which is the municipality being encouraged to go for municipal bond issues, building the Unity Mall. In other words, we are also trying to have many of those schemes which we think will speed up the capital expenditure together with carrying forward the reforms. Also trying to build up accommodation for police personnel in the states. So those conditions will be laid. And actually this year we have been talking through the officials with the chief secretaries of the state governments to say that this moves fast and moves early. So my strong belief is in the month of April itself, there should be substantial number of proposals coming from many states so the release can happen straight away. A lot of these discussions have already happened as to what is the scheme, how is it tailored, how is it different from last year, is it going to be very onerous to implement and so on. So all the differences have been ironed out and I expect the project proposals from the states to come well early in April itself. So unlike the last year, this year, it'll start rolling out faster.
May I call upon Mr. Siddharth Birla, past president?
Now it really feels like a business school. Good evening, madam. It's very hard to read the budget and try to see if something has been missed. I think nothing has been missed, so all congratulations to you and your team. But madam, there was one issue that FICCI had been pressing for very hard, which perhaps has just escaped attention. There is a lower tax regime for people who start businesses by 2024, by end of 2024. there are some people who believe it should be extended year by year. And when we had the pre-budget meeting, FICCI had pressed hard that I think we should take a bold step and announce for 5 years this window. Because you're not going to reduce the tax because it's already at a kind of minimum. So you're not going to reduce the tax. You might as well increase the period. Coming out of COVID, a lot of people are making their investment plans. So let's take an example. Even as a domestic company, if by even February 2023, if I decide to put in an investment, there is probably no chance that it will be operative before 2024 March. So, you're left in a limbo. So what happens, you prefer to actually either do away with the decision or defer the decision. So if we are trying to capture people coming in to invest in the country, maybe a longer window, maybe not 5 years, FICCI has pressed for 5 years, maybe not 5, but at least longer period could have been considered. So I think we still have time to do that if you think it proper.
May I call upon Sandeep Samani, past president, to ask a question, please?
Thank you, Shubhakant. Madam Finance Minister, I think the only word to describe this year's budget is absolutely, it was a brilliant budget. I think you've covered all the territory and you've not left anything either for growth or for a more equitable growth. And you are actually walking the roadmap that you had shown us to the country a few years ago. So my compliments to you and to your team. I just have a suggestion, madam, which is not budget related, and it's been brought to your notice. The government has been doing a lot of things in terms of ease of doing business. There is currently one constraint, unfortunately, in the CCI not being able to take decisions because it does not have a quorum. I would just recommend some early resolution to that. Thank you, ma'am.
May I? Namaskar, ma'am. Most heartening to hear your views on tourism. For the first time, really, a finance minister has taken it upon herself or himself to put such a focus on tourism. Extremely heartened to hear that there is going to be so much money put into infrastructure, whether it's airports or whether it's railways. And we do believe that it is, of course, it's a long-term thing, but it will certainly help us. So for me, it's just compliments to you, and from the industry, from the travel, tourism and hospitality industry, thank you very much, ma'am.
So Y.K. Modi, past president.
Ma'am, at the outset, I join President and others for congratulating a fantastic budget. There is nothing on the taxation which I have a suggestion to make. One thing the government which you mentioned is government is continually removing unnecessary compliances and regulations. And but there is still a long way to go, so we would like to work strongly with your department and the government to give more suggestions on how to make life easier for honest businessmen. So similarly, so the point was you and the Prime Ministers have been saying you want to trust the taxpayers. But unfortunately, there is one suggestion in this budget that if you send money abroad, which is tax-paid money, you will further pay 20%. We are told that some people are misusing, hence everybody has to suffer. So I would suggest those who are misusing should be hauled up, but honest taxpayer should not run from pillar to post and be taxed again on his tax-paid income. For us, whether we spend in India or abroad makes no difference, as long as we have paid our due taxes. So this is my request.
May I call on Mr. Dinesh Kanabar? I think.
Ma'am, as a tax professional, we are trained to find errors and our eyes only go to say what's wrong. And in that light, I must just compliment you that there is really nothing much that one can find in the provisions of the finance bill which one would really be negative about. I had two suggestions to make, ma'am. One is we have put a restriction of 10 crores on investment into a residential house if capital gains have arisen. And there are two limbs to it. One is if capital gains have arisen on sale of a residential house or other assets. And I can understand to an extent that these provisions apply to other assets. If somebody has sold equity shares, got gains, you don't want that money to be used for a residential house as a tax shelter. But extending this from one house to another may not be warranted. So for example, people have got houses, they may have inherited there for a very, very long time. They are selling that house, they might make a substantial capital gain, but they're just buying another house, substituting it. And extending that to section 54 may be reconsidered. 54F one can relate to. That was one suggestion. The second suggestion, madam, which I wanted to leave with you is that there has been a proposed change of taxation of REIT and InvIT, which has caused quite a flutter. And the proposition which I wanted to make is that if there is a redemption of units, REIT units, the excess could well be taxed as capital gains, but to treat it as other income and tax it at full rate maybe is not warranted. It is really killing this industry, which after a lot of effort has taken shape and is inconsistent with how things happen globally. So I would request that this be reconsidered, ma'am.
Would you like to respond to any of these? Right. Sunil, would you, Sunil Sanghai?
Thank you. Honorable Minister, the editorial of Times of India today, the headline summarizes what we are hearing, the sentiment here. It says, Madam Finance Minister, this is probably the best budget from 2014. And I think we all agree to that. I have a suggestion, there's no question.
I think in order to get, I think, the Finance Minister for us to gainfully utilize the time, if there are any questions on the direction of the budget of the long term, I would really appreciate that.
No. Suggestions are good.
Ma'am,
Please
suggestions are definitely welcome, but we would like to hear you as well.
So the suggestion is with regard to disinvestment and the privatization. Rightly so, it has not found place in the budget speech, and the target also got reduced because obviously the market condition, etc. The privatization has two angles. It also creates the efficiency in the economy, and that does not depend so much on the market because it's a long-term privatization.